we'll bash on. Got the roll call, so Chris has got those figures, has she, those names?
If we just run through the roll call, I'll mark you off as we go. So we've had apologies from Councillor Holmes. Councillor Roberts?
Here.
Yeah. Yes, she is.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams will join us as soon as he can. Mr. Alexander?
Present and correct.
Yeah, I can hear you, thank you. Mr. Barnes?
I'm here. Good evening.
Can hear you, thank you. Mr. Fussell has provided his apologies. Oh. And, Dr. Kirby was with us just now, wasn't he?
He was.
Oh, I've lost him shortly. Hopefully Dr. Kirby can join us back again. And
you haven't asked me if I'm here, Sarah, but I'm here.
yes, are you here, Mr. Hughes?
Yes, I'm present, but not correct. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, that concludes the roll call.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, well, that included apologies. Well, the first thing I can do, I think, is wish you all a happy new year. Because we haven't met this year yet, so there we go. I'm dreadfully sorry that it's this type of meeting again. The meeting last year, the AGM as it were, last year was the same, as you know. And I was saying earlier on that I had problems, if you remember. I lost vision altogether and was running it blind, but able to hear people, not see people, which was very awkward. This time we appear to be okay. But nice to see you all. We don't meet very often. But there's quite a lot to get through today. So first of all, the item number 3, declarations of interest. I think we said last time that as we're doing it on Zoom, if there are any, rather than giving declarations of interest orally, we can do that, but also we need to follow that up by putting it in writing, which can be by email. Okay, so does anybody have any declarations of interest so far? And some might emerge, I suppose, but not at the moment. Excellent. Okay, so we've all got the pack with a very thick pack. It's like a telephone directory today, very thick. So item number 4 on the agenda then is to receive the minutes of the meeting of the 1st of Feb. If we've all seen those, I'm not necessarily going to go through them page by page, but is there anything that anybody wants to pick up from those minutes? On page 1, page 2, page 3, well, it's actually page 5, isn't it, I'm on now, because the first 2 pages can't do it. I'm on page 5, which is page 3 of the minutes, if you see what I mean. Page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10. All I would say about virtual meetings is I think we discussed that last item then, and it was sort of talking about the future really rather than making any decisions. I think we touched on the sort of models that not just us but other organizations might have in the future with our experience from Zoom and Starleaf and Tealeaf and anything else for that matter, as to whether people will start having more hybrid type meetings, because for some people, distance or illness or other things makes it easier. I know of 1 or 2 organizations that are thinking that they might stick with a hybrid model, but maybe that's for the future. But I just remember we discussed it. Could be useful. Okay, so can we say then that those minutes accurately reflect the meeting of last year? If you'd like to raise your hand to approve them. That looks like unanimous to me. Thank you very much. So we move on to the independent review of the ethical standards framework. if you've had time to read that. All I would, is this the one? Yeah. Towards the end, it lists the people that were interviewed, and under chairs of standard committee, it does mention that the chair of Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Authority Standards Committee was interviewed. Just to let you know, nobody asked me, so I played no part in that. That was my only comment on it. It seems, I don't know, a lot of it seemed fairly obvious and fairly straightforward to me. Nothing particularly controversial in there. Is anybody?
Do you want me to just give a sort of a brief overview, just very, very quick, just some sort of background information to it, Chair?
If you would, and I think Ronnie then had his hand up. He might have a question. Yes, please.
So obviously the report was, the review was commissioned by Welsh Government, who appointed an independent consultant, Richard Penn, who undertook the review. Richard Penn is sort of quite experienced. He's been a chief exec of a few local authorities in England, but he is based in Wales. He's got considerable knowledge of the framework and sort of local government as a whole. So he was appointed to undertake the work for Welsh Government. So obviously the review was to look for any changes, any proposals with an aim to get them in ahead of the local elections in May 22. However, the timescales now of the report being published and sort of the consultation process going back to Welsh Government, it's unlikely that they're going to meet those timescales because some of the recommendations will require legislative changes as well. So it's unlikely that it will go through that process before May. It's slightly unfortunate timing-wise. There's a conference on Wednesday, a Standards Committee conference, at which Richard Penn, the author, is presenting his report to the Monitoring Officers Group for Wales and chairs and members of standards committees that are registered for that conference. After he presents his report, Welsh Government are going to comment then on his actual presentation as well. So it's really good information that will come out of that conference on Wednesday. So it's just unfortunate we're sort of 2 days early for to really get the real the meat out of the story from the author of the report. But suffice to say, that I think the report sets out that the framework is pretty much is pretty good as it currently is. But there are areas which he's pointed out for improvement. Probably the main ones to draw attention to is obviously the bit about mandatory training. That's something I think that's been sort of positively received and welcomed from the feedback I've heard. Increasing use of local resolutions, so making that more widely used, and extending the powers for the public sector ombudsman for Wales. So that's really the sort of the general gist of it. Hopefully, like I say, we'll get to know a lot more and certainly get to know Welsh Government's take on it on Wednesday and feed that back into a future meeting.
So thanks for the background. Ronnie, you wanted to say something, and then I think Simon does.
Thank you. I think it was very helpful to have that context provided. And as you say, Richard Penn is very experienced in all of this. And actually, there's no one better, I think, that could be asked to write such a report. I am, however, reflecting on some of the points that have come out of this report. It seems to me that he is very concerned about the profile of standards committees and thinks that they should take an important role in the work of any authority. He is rightly supportive of those that meet frequently and work to a prescribed agenda, and by inference, if not by actual comment, is critical of those that meet infrequently. And it seems to me that there are issues here that we will need to consider. If we are to follow best practice, as is suggested in the Penn report. We will need, I think, to have an organised schedule of meetings, an organised programme for training, which is something that I have reflected on before at previous meetings, and which has, to an extent, fallen by the wayside, perhaps for understandable reasons, but those reasons cannot be allowed to exist in perpetuity. And I think there are lessons for us here as a standards committee to take on board. And we do need, in my submission, a forward meeting schedule. We need a plan of where we're going as a standards committee, and all of that is supported in terms of what is included in the Penn report. And at that point, I will pause. Thank you.
Well, thanks. I think that's a fair comment. I mean, yes, I picked up one or two of those points. He's quite clear on one or two of those points, isn't he? Simon, you want to say something?
Oops. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just there was some other points I was going to make, but just to pick up on that, I mean, I think there does also need to be an element of proportionality as well. I mean, we don't get a lot of complaints, to say the least, which is brilliant. So I think in terms of frequency of meetings, I mean, I think, there does need to be some proportionality of resources as well. If we've got business to transact, obviously we should meet, but I think the frequency should be, I would suggest, should be based on the amount of business that we need to transact as a committee, would be my comment on that. And then I was just going to make a general point, really, just to welcome a lot of the recommendations in here. I mean, the 2 points being alluded to already, which I thought were very positive. There was the mandatory training and the increased use of local resolution, which I think are both very positive things. And also really just wanted to endorse the Welsh standard system generally, because I do think it is a very strong system, and I have experience of the English one as well by comparison. I think the Welsh one has some real teeth, which I think is very necessary. So yeah, I thought it was all very positive.
Well, thanks for that too. I think I'm going to take all of those points on board. A lot of it seemed to be directed at councils rather than authority standards committees, but although they are specifically mentioned. And it seems to me there's a danger that poor old councillors are going to be over standard committeed, because county councils certainly are going to have, if they haven't got them already, they're going to have standards committees. They're advertising for them now, I've noticed. So they're going to be looked at in their role as a councillor. They're going to be looked at as a standards authority for people like us and national parks and everywhere else. I just hope that they don't go overboard in having too many standards audits committees, maybe giving conflicting advice, maybe not, who knows. But somewhere in between, there needs to be a balance. And I take Ronnie's point about we could have more scheduled meetings. We could decide in advance what we wanted to discuss at those meetings. We don't have any complaints, fortunately, and I've still got my fingers crossed. We haven't even had for some time now anybody even asking for dispensations for quite a while now. I can't remember the last one that we had. So we need to strike a balance, I guess, between, yes, having a more structured approach, and certainly the mandatory training, no problem with that. But then it would depend really on how often we wanted to meet, whether that was quarterly, monthly, twice yearly, whatever it happened to be, but not necessarily meeting for the sake of it.
Just sort of up there, some of the discussions Sarah and I have been having is around the need for certainly at least another one additional meeting within the calendar year, and to sort of pick up on some of the points around training. Yes, sure. There'll be mandatory training, I think, covered off by local authorities for fire authority, but for the independent members, there's certainly there may be gaps that we need to pick up. But as a standards committee, there's certainly training that we propose that there's something that we can do around case studies, that type of thing. But hopefully there'll be more information that we'll pick up on Wednesday that can form our decision making around that.
We were going to have a second meeting, I remember, last summer, and that didn't happen. And we were going to have some more training last autumn, and that didn't happen. Now, we can blame it on COVID for the time being, but Ronnie's point is you can't keep blaming everything on COVID, and we've got to get our act together.
We'll choose Brexit next, and we'll blame it on Brexit next.
Blame it on Brexit. Okay. Yeah, Mark? Can't hear you, Mark. Can't hear you.
How's that?
Better. Yes, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, just picking up, I guess, on Ronnie's point, and sort of from sort of page 32, 33 onwards, where it talks about the specific functions, and one of those being monitoring the operation of the code of conduct. I guess there's probably a bigger role for the lay members to play in terms of attending the fire authority meetings and observing what goes on and how the code of conduct is followed in practice, and giving feedback to the chair for whether we have a quarterly or a biannual meeting to report back on how we see it working in progress. So proactively, rather than necessarily just the retrospective aspect which we would have if we were having cases coming to us.
Yeah, I think that would be useful. And from time to time, independent members have been to meetings, but I think it's been a bit ad hoc. But that could be built into a program so that independent members went, each, say, twice a year. Not make it too onerous, but that would maybe cover it. Ronnie? Mm-hmm.
I have attended one meeting in the past, but only one, and provided feedback to the annual meeting of this committee. I mean, I take on board the point that's been made about not meeting unnecessarily, and I do understand the reasons for that. But my issue here is that with an annual meeting, the committee, I don't think, has structural coherence because we don't meet often enough in order to achieve it. So we do have to find a position, I would suggest, in the middle somewhere. And if we move to 6 monthly meetings, fine. But I do agree with the point that's just been made about periodically attending as an observer meetings of the authority, and just observing that the code of practice is adhered to. That said, I wouldn't expect it not to be, but I think it's just providing the assurance that the system is working and effective in operation. Thank you.
Yeah, I think everything that's been said is very constructive and very useful. So if we can make a note of those suggestions in the minutes. Do
the independent members routinely get notice of when the fire authorities have been held and information on the reports being presented?
No. I think we get a calendar. I think, but that's about it. But I think we get an annual calendar, but we don't get a regular updates of meetings or reports from meetings. No. I just wonder whether the authority would be frightened to death if we had 2 or 3 members of the standards committee turning up to observe them at meetings.
Obviously, all the meetings are still being held via Starleaf at the moment, but they are meetings. So anybody.
I would imagine that we will be going back to more face-to-face meetings later this year, and perhaps that would be the spur for us to start attending meetings as being suggested. So if Chris can make a note of those proposals, all of which were very helpful, that would be good. Anything more on that? No. Okay. So the next one is the report of the Public Services Ombudsman, which is page 69, which means it's probably Yeah, page 69.
Yes, Chair. So if you're happy, do you want me to give the preamble to this report?
Yes, please.
Certainly. So this is a report on the Public Service Ombudsman Wales annual report of accounts for the year 2020-21. And members are fully aware of the main roles of the Ombudsman, which are to investigate complaints, consider complaints about breaches on the Code of Conduct, and also to drive systematic improvement of public services. With reference to members' Code of Conduct complaints, the Ombudsman can consider complaints about the behaviour of a number of public service bodies, including fire and rescue authorities. And the annual report details the performance of the Ombudsman's office over the year. It also identifies the workload that they've had. And in the attached report, you'll see that the number of Code of Conduct complaints in 2021 was 535, which is an increase of 47% compared on the previous year. And of those, 308 were taken forward for investigation. And there were very low numbers of complaints about national parks and fire authorities, which tend to be consistently low, but again, they were low again this year. If you look at the highest number of complaints that were received, again, they were related to promotion of equality and respect, which was 55% of complaints that they received, which was up 6% on the previous year. Closely followed then by failure to disclose or register interests, which was at 14% this year, but was actually an improvement on the year previously. And then the third highest occurrence was complaints related to integrity, which was 12% of those complaints. Again, that was up 2% the previous year. In 2021, 92% of all of the Code of Conduct complaints were closed after assessment against the two-stage test, which looks to ensure that a complaint is supported by direct evidence and is suggestive that a breach has taken place. And the second part of that test is that it's in the public interest to investigate that matter. And although fewer cases were being referred for investigation after the two-stage test, of those that were, the Ombudsman found that evidence suggestive of a breach of the code occurred in more cases. And that suggests that the Ombudsman are using the two-stage test to good effect and identifying more of the most serious cases at that assessment stage. If I could just draw a member's attention to the two appendices that we've got attached. So we have the annual report and accounts in its entirety and also the executive summary. If I draw members' attention to page 81, which gives us a snapshot of the year, and it shows the Ombudsman's journey through all the various months of the year. And then on the following pages, 82 and 83, we can see the key performance indicators that the Ombudsman are measured against, and you can see the improvement or change in performance compared to the previous year. If I just move members then onto page 86 of the Code of Conduct, we will see that complaints are slightly higher in 2021 than in 1920. But again, complaints against fire authorities remain low. There was only one in 2020-21. Which I can confirm was not this authority. And then if we look at page 90, this discusses the referrals to the adjudication panel for Wales. and shows they were completed. And then page 95 onwards of the pack, members will see is the executive summary of the Ombudsman's report, which I'm sure members will agree is an interesting and informative format, which I found very useful as a nice summary of the whole report. So if the recommendation for this paper is it's recommended that members know the content of the report. I'm happy to try and address any questions that you may have or would like to discuss.
Thank you, Sarah, for that. I've just made a couple of notes. We'll come to other people afterwards if they wish. I was a little surprised at the larger increase, 47% increase in the number of complaints. I thought was a big jump, and don't know whether there was a particular reason for that. And on a sort of more frivolous note, it just shows the sometimes meaningless percentages when you see that although I'm concerned about an increase of 47%, complaints against members of the fire authorities went up 100%, but only because it went from 0 to 1. So it's a slightly sort of misleading percentage. And then I went on to look at I looked at page 82, which was their key performance indicators, and I was disappointed, and no doubt they were, about customer satisfaction, because their target was 83%, and in previous years it's been as high as 91%, but it hovers around the very low 60% in terms of customer service received being helpful. So they need to do a bit of work on customer satisfaction, perhaps. And then again, 47% more allegations of breach of conduct was mentioned again later on. And then again, I noticed that on page 86 that 35 complaints were about one particular individual. So that might have been a bit of a blip there somewhere along the line. And just, without going through it line by line, page for page, they were some of my observations. Anybody else want to comment? Simon? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just looking at page 70 at the bottom there with the breakdown of the different types of complaints, and just noticing the sort of disproportionate amount of complaints about equality and respect. And I just wonder whether that's, well, two things really. One, whether that's an indicator of some sort of systemic problem, because it is proportionately much higher than any of the other categories. And leading on from that, just sort of wondering, if we're talking about inclusivity and trying to attract people from different walks of life to serve on councils and authorities, whether that's frankly going to put people off a bit if there's a problem with equality and respect. I think it's a bit of a shame that equality and respect are lumped together, because I'd be quite interested to separate those out and see how many were around equality, whereas respect could be a sort of tit for tat, inappropriate use of language in the heat of an argument type of thing, whereas equality could be something more serious, like some sort of racism element or some sort of something along those lines. So so those were my observations.
Okay, thanks for that. Anybody else? No. Okay, thanks very much. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry for my my lateness in joining.
Yes, it's absolutely outrageous.
Forgive me, please. I beg of your mercy.
Granted. We're on the Ombudsman's report, Joel. We've just been through that. We were introduced to it, so we're moving on now to the to item 7, I think, which is page 103. If you have your pack with you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chair.
Sarah, are you going to introduce this?
Geraint has got the pleasure
Geraint?
of this.
Okay.
My turn again. Tag team today. We're tagging it back and forth now. So, yeah, the Ombudsman has the updated guidance on the code of conduct. This one really is just a refresh of the guidance that the Ombudsman issues. I think the last one they did was in 2016. So this is their most updated version now. It's quite a useful document in helping members interpret the code. Obviously, it covers off a lot around the two-stage test that Sarah covered off in the earlier report. There's obviously within the updated version, there's obviously revised cases and experiences drawn from those cases with the examples that are outlined within the report. Yeah, as I say, it's a very useful document for all members, and obviously as a fire and rescue authority, it's a statutory requirement for us to adopt the code. So happy to for comment there.
Thanks very much. I picked up on page 120, paragraph 1.24. It says, in my view, Standards Committee hearings should also be conducted in public, unless there are valid reasons for not doing so. It's obviously a personal view because it says in my view, but I thought they already were able to come to such meetings. Sarah, Geraint?
Yeah,
Nobody ever comes, but they're entitled to come, aren't they?
Yes. I think the majority of standards committees are all public meetings, yes. Unless there's specific cases which have to be held in private. But yes, all of our meetings are public, so it's just
that's what made me wonder why he raised it in his view if it's already in place.
Yeah, I think it's just if there are issues where some councils, I think there have been comments made that with some of the cases that have been discussed, they would prefer it to be in private.
Well, yes, but you've always got that provision available to you. But in general, they should be open, shouldn't they?
Yes, they should. Yes.
Well, out of interest again, how do we let the public know that we're meeting as a committee?
All of our meetings are obviously published through our website, but what we currently do, and obviously with meetings being held remotely, because they're all recorded, at the conclusion of the meeting, all the recordings are uploaded onto the website then, so they're available to view after the meeting. Okay.
I did see some, nothing to do with our particular committee or even Wales. I think it was somewhere in England where a member of the public had wanted to attend a Zoom meeting and was told that they couldn't for security reasons because it was on Zoom or something like that, words to that effect. And people were saying, well, actually, it should be easier for the public to attend if it's on Zoom, not more difficult. But it caused a bit of a furore somewhere. Okay, anybody want to? I don't think there's anything particularly earth-shattering in that is new. Anybody want to comment on that? Mark, yeah.
Yeah, just I guess echoing Simon's point from before is that the guidance from the Ombudsman actually does break down into examples around equality versus those around respect and consideration for others. So it does then seem strange that they're lumped together in the full report. So it would be useful to see that breakdown because they are quite different aspects, I think, of the potential interactions and potentially the level of seriousness as well.
Yeah. There were a lot of examples, weren't there? Is this the one where there were over 30 examples? And that comes further on, I think. The adjudication.
Yes.
There's something like 35 or 40 examples. But the examples, I think, are very useful, aren't they?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so that's for advice. We all content with that? So we move on to the casebook, which is perhaps where the examples come. Is that the next item? What are we on, 8?
Yes, Chair, item number 8. Shall I introduce the paper?
Yes, please.
Lovely. So the Public Serviceman Ombudsman for Wales produces quarterly Code of Conduct casebooks, and since members considered issue 23 in our meeting last year, the Ombudsman has published 2 further casebooks. Excuse me, those being issues 24 and 25 on its website. Now, these provide the public with an overview of the work of the Ombudsman, and the Standards Committee review the work of the Ombudsman as a matter of good governance. So, if I just take you through the appendices, Appendix I is Casebook Issue 24, which covers January to December 2020, and then I'll discuss Appendix II, which is the January to March 2021, which is Casebook 25. So obviously I'm not going to go through and discuss each of these in turn, as I'm sure members have had a chance to have a look at. But what I felt was quite interesting was the first casebook had 13 cases, and in the majority of those there was no action necessary taken. And 2 of those 13 were then referred through to the Standards Committee for the particular authority, and 1 of those was referred through to the adjudication panel in Wales. And then looking at Appendix 2, there were 3 cases there, 2 of which were both referred to the Standards Committee, and the 3rd one was then referred through to the adjudication panel in Wales. And the common theme here again was the most occurring incidents were again promotion of equality and respect, as we discussed a couple of times through the meeting already.
Yes, I mean, to take up the points that were made earlier about distinguishing between equality and respect, I understand why they haven't put too much detail in these summaries, but in some of them it is difficult to work out whether the charge was more respect rather than equality or vice versa, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, any comments on any of those? I always think these are useful, these examples. I'm always pleased they're happening elsewhere, not in our authority. But Appendix 2. Anything from Appendix 2 where there are some more examples, weren't there? No. Okay. So now we've got the annual report then, which is item 9, page 221. Who's doing that, Sarah? You or?
Yes, it's me again. It's the Sarah show for the next couple of minutes. Apologies, members. So this is looking at the adjudication panel for Wales annual report 2021. So the adjudication panel is an independent tribunal set up to determine alleged breaches of an authority's statutory members' code of conduct by elected and co-opted members, and that includes fire and rescue authorities. The 2 statutory functions of the APW are to form case or interim case tribunals, and also to consider appeals from members against the decision of local authority standards committees. Section 2 of the report that's attached in Appendix 1 provides detail of the performance and progress from 2016 to 2021, and it also includes summaries of case tribunal hearings at Section 3. Just for members, there was 1 appeal in this period where the initial findings were held up, and the report from the adjudication panel for Wales also identifies their business priorities and their expenditure during the financial year. I haven't got anything I particularly want to draw members' attention to in there, other to recommend that members note the Adjudication Panel for Wales Annual Report 2021.
And I just noticed, as I think we did last year, something to do with the appeals in their charts. It seems that they had one appeal in 4 years, which is, I don't know, maybe that means they're getting it right the first time and there's nothing to appeal against. But I know the numbers are fairly low, but that's all I noted was the very low number of appeals.
Yeah, I mean, I just noted the sort of very low number of cases generally, really. I mean, it's 2020 to 21, they only did 4, which, you know, but that's obviously a good thing. You know, hopefully that means the system's working well and there isn't a need for a lot of referrals.
Okay. Anybody else? No. Okay. Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales Draft Annual Report. Sarah, is that you again?
No, this one's me, Chair.
Geraint? Okay, go ahead, Geraint, please.
And this one's just for a report for noting for members. It's just an overview of the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales Draft Annual Report. It was published in November, the draft report, and it doesn't actually get finalised till later this month, I believe. It's normally around about the end of February. The final report is published. But I think it's pretty much as it will be, pretty much as is set out in the draft report. It's obviously a report which sets out the determination of salary levels for members. The report was presented to our Fire Authority in December, so Fire Authority members will have received this and again noted the comments within it there. Overall, it sets out obviously annual uplifts for 22-23, and at the top of page 242 it shows the salary levels for the Fire Authority members, and then the senior salary levels for Fire Authority members and chairs in that those bullet points there. And then within the actual report itself, within the Appendix I, Section 8 of the report covers off the payments relative to Welsh Fire Authority members, and that's on page 275 of the document. What surprised me on page 279, determination 38 and 39, they appear to be saying that we can claim for preparation time before meetings and for travelling time. That's new, isn't it? I've never done that. Is that new? I've never claimed for travelling time and never claimed for preparation time because I didn't think we were allowed to. Not aware whether it's new. I can check back to previous years to see if it's been.
Has anybody else claimed? Have any of the independents claimed for travelling time or preparation time?
No, never.
No.
Never.
I'm sure it says somewhere in my original appointment that the travelling time specifically did not count. So I think this is new.
I know, obviously, within Section 12 it sets up reimbursement of travelling costs.
Yeah, expenses, yes, but not travelling time is to be included in the payments. So, I mean, it takes me the thick end of an hour to get from here to Llantrisant every time. So that's 2 hours travelling. But I've never claimed that travelling time. I claim the expenses, but not the travelling time as part of the daily rate sort of thing. Could we check on that to see if that's new? I think it is, which is why they made them determinations in this report. Because if it wasn't new, they wouldn't have mentioned it. Perhaps.
Certainly check on that. Feedback to
Ronnie?
I'm similarly concerned about the reasonable time for pre-meeting preparation. I mean, as you acknowledged at the beginning of this meeting, we have something that's essentially rather bulky in material in terms of the papers for today. And I mean, that's good. I'm not suggesting that they should be less than that, because we need a substantive agenda upon which to comment on supporting papers. But this does take time to read, and I think we should have clarification on that point as well, please.
Absolutely, yeah. I did mention that it was determination 38 and 39 we need clarification on, because you're quite right. I mean, to read that and give it its full consideration is certainly a couple of hours' work.
Yeah, we'll certainly get clarification and feed that back via email as soon as we can.
Thank you very much. Okay. Did I have another query on that? Perhaps not. No, which takes us... Yeah, which takes us then to item 11. Now, I know this is for decision today, Sarah, and I know it was a sort of draft and all that sort of stuff. But it did occur to me that the recommendation that we have an annual report is with effect from the 5th of May of this year, whereas we seem to be saying we're going to do one for last year. So I was wondering whether we don't do one now and start after the 5th of May when we need to. Comment? Any comments?
Yes. Sorry. I'll have to check clarification on that, Chair, because the way that I read that was that we would have to publish by May 22, which would be publishing on the previous year's activity. So I may have interpreted that incorrectly.
No, it may be correct. I'm raising it as a clarification point, I think.
Yes, so that was my interpretation, that by the 5th of May 22, we would have to publish the work of the Standards Committee for the previous financial year.
Okay, well, yeah, that's one interpretation of it.
Yeah, that was my working interpretation.
Or it could be that you start doing it from May 2022. I don't know what the answer is.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Anyway, what you've suggested here is a format, a draft. There's there were a couple of typos in there, I noticed. Page 333, the bottom line. Yeah. You've got the committee meets at annually, so we got an at too many, and we spelt endeavours wrong in the next line. There might be others, but I mean, in terms of a structure, because this is a structure rather than a finalised report. What do people think? Any comment, Ronnie?
I'm not critical of the report in any way. I think it sets out clearly what the scope and function of the committee is, and what it does. I suppose if I were commenting on specific content, I would say that at 4 and the issues discussed, that's just a list of items that were considered, but it might be helpful just to put a line or two for context around each of those, because otherwise, I notice it says commentary on the above can be added here.
Yeah,
and I think what I'm saying is that I think it does need perhaps a few lines of commentary on each, just to provide context.
Sure.
But I'm not critical of the report. I think it's nicely laid out, and it's clear and specific. And like you, I noticed the spelling mistakes, so I don't need to repeat those. Yeah, thank you.
Certainly, as you've identified, there is provision for us to make a commentary on any or all or none of those. We can do that. So, anybody else like to comment on anything in that? Okay, so how will we take this
Sorry,
forward?
sorry, Chair. Sorry, can I change that? I was just a bit confused about in terms of when would this be published during the year? Would this be immediately after the annual meeting, and how would it then be approved?
Yeah,
I guess.
I was just about to ask Sarah, how did you plan to take this forward? Are we going to put some commentary there, which you and I or others could agree, or?
Yes, so the commentary that I was proposing there underneath each of the issues discussed would be complemented by the notes and the minutes that Chris is taking, and
Right.
the notes and the actions that I've already put down here. So, for example, when we were discussing under agenda item 5, the review of the ethical standards framework, and we were discussing about the need for this standards committee to meet more frequently than at least annually, and to acknowledge the mandatory training, and where we discussed about having a forward work plan and a training programme. Those would have been the elements that I would propose to put underneath those issues discussed. And then
you could lift things from the discussions today for each of those items.
Yes, that was the plan. And then ideally, we would then report this to the Fire Authority at their last meeting of the financial year. So on this one, it would be we would propose to complete this report with the suggestions that members have already given, and I will double spell check in future. So apologies for the spelling mistake, members. I obviously haven't marked everything to be checked on spell checking, but for that to go to the forward work programme for the Fire Authority, which I believe is the 28th of March this year.
Right. Well, before that happens, Sarah, could you knock up, as you just proposed, that you could extract some comments from the discussions on each of those from today, but could you then circulate that sort of final draft, if you like, to all members before it goes anywhere, so that we've got an agreement on the final product before it goes anywhere?
Absolutely, Chair. Absolutely, I'm more than willing and happy to do so.
I think members would like that. Okay. Anything more on that?
No, I just double check. I say no, and then ask another question. Apologies. Can I just double check that members would be happy for their photograph and profiles to appear in this report?
What's a profile?
Just where I've put under section 2 the membership. So your photograph would appear there, and then when I talk about profile is when you joined and when you started.
All right. Yeah.
Yes.
People happy with that? Yeah. Looks as though people are. Ronnie thinking. Ronnie.
Is it no problem with my photograph? Except I'm sorry for people that have to look at it. But just on the information that you're going to put around it, can I just be clear? In terms of profile, it's just going to be the date of joining, and I think I did provide some background and some context when I joined, but that is now very dated. So I'm hoping the authority won't draw on that for the purpose of this report. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, a fair point. Sarah, as it's our first attempt at an annual report, I think we should stick at exactly what you said, which is the names, when people joined, and leave it at that. If in the future people want to add to that or think we should add to that, then that can be considered at that time. But for now, first attempt, stick with what you've got there.
Absolutely.
Yes. Everybody happy? Ronnie, is that all right? Yeah. Okay, well, now we come to the very sad item, which is that I have to not only give up the chair, but have to give up my place on this committee in August, which, because my time is up, my 12 years or whatever it is, it looks like slightly more than 12, doesn't it? No, it is 12. So I joined in 2011. I served as a member. Then I became chairman. All of that has now come to a conclusion. So we have to find a new chairman who needs to be an independent member. And as a consequence, we need to recruit for a new independent member as well. So it's a bit of a double whammy. Now, we did sort of put out in advance that this would arise today. Nobody has been approached as to whether they would like to be chair. I don't know how you want to decide who wants to be chair, whether you do it by seniority or whether you do it by volunteer or whether you want to sort of fight each other in the playground. I really don't mind. How do you want to do it? I mean, Mark is the senior, and I think the others all started at the same time. But I don't know. I haven't spoken to Mark about this. I don't know if he wants to do it. I don't know whether everybody else would fight him for it. What do people think? Yes.
I think it should be seniority.
Okay.
Personally, I think that would be, yeah. I
Okay,
think
that's
they've probably got
a good suggestion. A good suggestion, and it's quite a nice, clean way of doing it, I suppose.
Yes,
and others will have their opportunity at a later date, perhaps, if they want it.
Yeah.
What do people think? Is that a reasonable way of taking it forward? We haven't come to Mark yet, but is that a good way to take it forward?
I certainly, for my part, Chairman, don't object to that kind of approach. However, that would be subject to the Constitution permitting us to operate in that manner. For example, I'd be more than willing to propose Mark as the new chair if he wished to take on board the chair, and at least then we avoid the way of introducing a seniority dimension, which may not be in line with the Constitution.
That's a fair point. I don't think there is a constitution, as it happens, but nevertheless, and Mark has kept very, very quiet because we've been talking about him without even asking him what he thinks. Mark, it has been suggested that you would make a good chairman for this committee for the next 4 years. Would you be interested in that post? In which case, somebody might propose you.
I've just been mulling over in my mind with other commitments whether or not this is something I should take on. I do believe I probably can't do it at this time, unfortunately. I do have other committees that I'm chairing at the moment around school governorship, so I am quite pressed for time, and okay. I wouldn't want to do a bad job of this. So I appreciate the opportunity, but I will have to turn it down.
Okay, well, we respect that decision and your honesty in telling us that. Don't half complicate it though, because
sorry, yes,
the next three all join at the same time. Is anybody willing to be proposed as chairman? So the other three, although David Fussell isn't actually here anyway, Ronnie or Simon, will either of you volunteer? Or wish to be proposed, should I say, for the sake of the Constitution?
Simon, do you have a view?
I think I'm slightly concerned just about the level of commitment, if I'm honest. And like Mark, I wouldn't want to take it on and then not be able to do it properly. That's why I've been hesitating a little bit. Okay,
Ronnie, do you have a view?
Well,
if it helps, I know we're saying that the commitment might increase, but in my experience, it isn't a huge commitment, really. It could increase, but Ronnie.
Well, I mean, if it's constitutionally correct and everyone is happy, then I don't object, and I would be happy to do it. But I mean, I'm conscious that others such as Mark have greater time and greater experience in the role, But if it would be helpful to process, then I'm happy to do it.
Okay, move Ronnie Alexander.
Right. You've just been proposed, Ronnie, and I think I'm entitled to second it. To take Joel's point, I don't think there is a formal laid down process for how we get a new chairman. Certainly when I was asked to do it, I don't remember any formal process that was put through. So are we content that we accept Ronnie being proposed?
Sorry, just in terms of obviously our procedural standing order, it's not going against anything within the authority's procedural standing orders. We've obviously debated the issue, and then there's been a proposal, a nomination, and a second there. So
I think that's what we did. I think that's what we did last time. So Ronnie Alexander has been proposed and seconded as the next chairman of this committee. All those in favour? No. Ronnie, congratulations, Ronnie. You are the new chairman of the committee.
Thank you. Thank you. I will do my best.
I'm sure it won't change your lifestyle or your way of life at all, and whatever. What I was going to say to you was, I don't know when we are going to meet again, but would you like to take over with effect from today, or would you prefer to wait till August whatever it is, which would be my exact date of leaving? I have no preference.
Well, out of courtesy to you, Chair, I think I would prefer if you run your full term and then cease, if that's your preference. But again, I'm happy either way.
Okay. Well, what we could do what we need to do between now and when I go is to recruit a new member anyway. And I think that both you and I ought to sit on that selection committee, because it'll be somebody that you will need to be comfortable with, not me, but I could lend my such experience as I have to that process. How's that?
Absolutely fine.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much. That was very painful. I'm very grateful to Ronnie for stepping in there. And I perfectly understand everybody else's reasons. We're all very, very busy, and I respect those decisions and for you being honest about them. I think we're done.
Chairman,
we haven't got any other business.
Chairman, if it is appropriate, I would just like to move a vote of thanks to you as the chair of the Standards Committee for quite some time, and quite a time before I joined the Standards Committee 4 years ago, which I can't believe it. I can't believe how fast the past 4 years have gone. But thank you to everything that you've done as chairman of the Standards Committee for the authority. It's a long time, and I'm sure all of my colleagues will wish to pay tribute and thanks to you for everything that you've done in that time.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, if I can echo those thoughts on behalf of the officers of the service. Obviously, to be a member for 12 years is really excellent service that you've given. And was it, I'm looking, just quickly checking, so 6 of those as chair. So, fantastic service, and we really appreciate the work that you've done for the service.
Well, thank you. It's been an honour and a privilege, and it's been really good to work with such nice people. So thank you all very much. And I think that is it now. There's we don't have any other business, but we got through a lot today. Thank you all very much. We may see you again if we decide to have another midsummer meeting or training. We may meet up again, but thank you and good night.
Thank you all.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.